Hey, here is another beautiful story. Enjoy.
Can you please just take care of him for a while?
I can't. I have work and my own family. Pay someone.
Wait, so you're telling me you're throwing them out? Your own brother's kids? The room went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. No, this one felt heavy, uncomfortable, like everyone heard it. But nobody wanted to respond. Because deep down, they all knew. That question didn't come from nowhere. It came from betrayal. Now, hold on, before you judge too quickly. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself on this one. If everything you had, your money, your comfort, your status, if all of it disappeared overnight, would the people around you still stand by you? Or would they start creating distance? Slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're completely on your own. Welcome back to Alex Romance and Divorce Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. And today's story, it's not just emotional, it's personal, because this one exposes something a lot of people don't like to admit. Sometimes, the people closest to you are only loyal to what you have, not who you are. Before we go any further, do me a quick favor, bestie. Like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps push these stories out to more people. And trust me, this is one of those stories people need to hear. Now, let me ask you one more thing. Have you ever wondered what happens when two completely different worlds collide? When wealth meets struggle? When pride meets quiet strength? And when secrets, carefully hidden, start affecting innocent lives? Because in this story, a widowed billionaire decided to test something most people are too afraid to face. Not business, not loyalty on paper, but real loyalty, family loyalty. And what he found out? Yeah, not everyone passed that test. Because this story doesn't start with wealth. It starts with loss. A man, powerful, respected, untouchable in business, standing in a hospital room, holding his newborn son in his arms, and realizing, in the same moment, that his wife, the one person who truly saw him, was gone. No time to process it, no space to breathe, just a crying baby, and a silence that felt too loud. And you would think, at a moment like that, family would step in, right? Support him, stand beside him, help carry the weight. Well, that's what he thought too. But grief has a way of opening your eyes. Not immediately, not all at once, but slowly, in the way people start acting differently, in the way conversations change, in the way help starts to come with hesitation. And that's when the question hit him, not out of anger, but out of clarity. If I had nothing, would they still be here? So, he decided to find out, not by asking, not by confronting anyone, but by doing something extreme, something that would strip everything away and reveal the truth. He made them believe he was no longer the man they depended on, and when that wasn't enough, he took it even further. He disappeared. Now, here's where things start to shift. Because while his world was built on money, control, and influence, there was someone else, living a completely different reality. Matina, she wasn't surrounded by luxury, didn't have people waiting on her, didn't wake up to comfort or certainty. Her life was structured around survival, work, responsibility, showing up, whether she felt like it or not. And unlike the people in his circle, she didn't pretend. If something didn't sit right with her, she said it. If she didn't trust you, you would know. No sugarcoating, no performance. So when their paths crossed, it wasn't soft, it wasn't easy. It was tension from the very beginning. Because to him, she looked like someone who could take advantage. Another person drawn to what he had. And to her? He looked like every other wealthy man who thought money gave him the right to question people's intentions. That first conversation? Yeah, it didn't go smoothly. You don't trust me, she said. arms folded, eyes steady. He didn't answer right away, just watched her, measuring. Then finally, "Well, I don't know you." She gave a small nod, like she expected that. "Exactly," she replied. "So don't act like you do." That right there? That was the moment everything changed, even if neither of them realized it yet. Because while others stayed around him for comfort, she stood in front of him with nothing to gain, and still didn't bend. Now, here's the part that makes this whole story heavier. It wasn't just about him, it was about the children. Two of them, a little girl, full of life, already used to a certain world, and a newborn boy, who hadn't even had the chance to understand what he lost. Because while everything was falling apart around them, they didn't know. They couldn't know. All they understood was presence. Who was there, and who wasn't. And that's where everything started to matter more. Not the money, not the image, not even the past. Just one question. Who will actually stay? Because it's easy to show up when things are comfortable. Easy to smile, to visit, to play your role. When everything is working in your favor. But when things shift, when the situation becomes inconvenient, that's when people start revealing themselves. Some step forward, others step back. And in this case, the difference was impossible to ignore, because while some people were slowly creating distance, one person kept showing up, not loudly, not for attention, just consistently. And that choice? It didn't just affect the children, it changed everything. Now, let's talk about the people who were supposed to be there no matter what. His family. At first, everything looked normal. They visited, checked in, spoke softly, carefully, like they understood the weight of what he had just lost. But grief has a way of sharpening your awareness. Little things start standing out. The way someone pauses before offering help. The way conversations shift when money is mentioned. The way concern starts to feel selective, and he noticed it, not all at once, but enough to make him question everything. Because when he needed them the most, when things were no longer stable, no longer certain, their energy changed. Requests were met with hesitation. Support came with conditions, and some offers never came at all. That's when it hit him, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet realization that settled in his chest. They were never really here for me. And once that thought took root, there was no ignoring it. So instead of confronting them, instead of arguing, accusing, or forcing answers, he made a decision, a risky one. He would remove the one thing that kept everyone connected to him, the one thing that made people stay, his money. And if that didn't reveal the truth, then he would go even further. Because sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to disappear from their world completely. And that decision? It's what led to everything you're about to witness. Before we step into chapter 1, if you've ever questioned people around you, if you've ever felt like loyalty comes with conditions, go ahead and drop a comment below. I read them, all of them, and don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, they don't just entertain, they teach. Atlanta didn't sleep the way people thought it did. Not in the parts where money lived, where tall glass homes sat behind quiet gates, where everything looked calm on the outside, but inside, different stories played out. Deo Ainsworth's home stood on a stretch of land that most people only saw in magazines. Wide driveway, clean lines, silence that felt intentional. Nothing out of place, everything controlled. From the outside, it looked like a life people dreamed about. Power, stability, success. But inside that house, there was a space no amount of money had been able to fill. It wasn't obvious at first. Guests never noticed it. Family didn't talk about it. Even the staff moved around it carefully, like everyone understood without saying it out loud. Because in a home that had everything, there was one thing missing: a child. And that absence? It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It sat quietly in moments that should have felt complete. Like the extra room upstairs that stayed untouched. Like the second chair at the dining table that never got used. like the silence that followed laughter. When it faded too quickly, Minra felt it the most, not because she said it often, but because of the way she moved through the house, carefully, thoughtfully, like she was trying not to disturb something fragile. One evening, she stood by the large window in the living room, watching the city lights in the distance. Deo walked in, loosening his tie, his steps slow. He paused when he saw her. "You've been standing there a while." She didn't turn immediately, just nodded once. "I like it when it's quiet," she said softly. He stepped closer, not too close, just enough to be there. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and somehow, that silence said more than anything else could have. It didn't start as a problem, not in the beginning. The first year of their marriage felt easy, natural. They weren't rushing anything. They had time, or at least they thought they did. By the second year, the conversations became more intentional, subtle at first. Little comments, light jokes. "What do you think?" Minra asked once, smiling slightly. "Boy or girl?" Deo smirked. "Both." They laughed. It felt simple then, but by the third year, the laughter started to fade. "Well, maybe we should just check," Minra said one morning, her tone careful. Deo looked up from his coffee. "Check what?" She hesitated. "Everything." That was the first appointment. Then came another, and another. Atlanta had some of the best specialists in the country, and Deo had access to all of them. Tests were run. Results came back. More tests followed. At first, the answers were vague, inconclusive. "Let's try again. Sometimes it just takes time." Time. That word started to feel heavier with each visit. By year 5, it wasn't vague anymore. The doctor sat across from them, hands folded, voice measured. "We've tried multiple approaches," he said. "At this point, we may need to start considering alternative options." Minra didn't respond. She just stared at the desk. Deo leaned forward slightly. "What exactly are you saying?" A pause. Then, "I'm saying natural conception is going to be very difficult." The room felt smaller after that. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because they had too much. Later that night, Minra sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers loosely clasped together. Deo stood near the door, watching her. "We're not giving up," he said. She nodded. But it wasn't immediate, and it wasn't convincing. "I know," she replied quietly. Then, after a moment, "I just didn't think it would be like this." That was the part they never prepared for. Not the waiting, not the uncertainty, but the slow realization that effort didn't always lead to results. Still, they kept trying, because the one thing they wanted more than anything was a child. From the outside, nothing about their life suggested struggle. Deo's name carried weight across Atlanta. Business deals closed faster when he walked into a room. People listened when he spoke. Doors opened before he even reached them. Their home reflected that success. High ceilings, clean architecture, everything designed with intention. No clutter, no chaos. Just perfection. But perfection has a way of hiding things, because inside that same space, there were moments that didn't match the image, like dinner nights that ended too quickly, plates cleared, conversations short, not because they didn't care, but because there was always something missing. Minra tried to fill that silence in small ways. Fresh flowers in rooms that didn't need them, soft music playing in the background, little changes that made the house feel warmer. But warmth without fullness, it doesn't last. One evening, they hosted a small gathering. Nothing excessive, just a few close associates. Laughter filled the room. Conversations flowed. From a distance, it looked like everything was right, until someone asked, "So, when are you two finally having kids?" It wasn't meant to hurt. It was casual, almost expected, but the shift was immediate. Minra smiled. Polite, controlled. "Well, we're working on it." Deo gave a small nod beside her. "Yeah, soon." The conversation moved on, but the moment didn't. Later that night, after everyone left, The house felt different, quieter than usual. Minra walked into the kitchen, slowly gathering glasses that didn't need to be moved yet. Deo leaned against the counter, watching her. "You didn't have to answer like that," he said. She paused briefly, then continued what she was doing. It was easier. He frowned slightly. Easier than what? She set the last glass down, turned toward him, then explaining. There it was, simple, honest, and for a second, neither of them knew what to say next, because the truth didn't need to be long. It just needed to be real. By year 6, hospitals had become part of their routine, not in a dramatic way, not urgent, just frequent, appointments scheduled weeks in advance, follow-ups that led to more follow-ups, procedures explained in calm, professional tones. Everything felt structured, controlled, almost clinical, but underneath that structure, there was pressure. Minra sat in the waiting room one afternoon, her fingers resting lightly on her lap, not fidgeting, just still. Deo walked in moments later, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. "You didn't have to come early," he said. She nodded. "I know." A pause. "I just didn't want to be late." He sat beside her, not too close, not distant either, just there. When her name was called, she stood up first, steady, composed, but as they walked into the consultation room, that composure started to thin. The doctor spoke, explained options, outlined possibilities, words like alternative methods, next steps, low probability. They listened, because that's what you do when you still have hope. After the appointment, they sat in the car, engine off, neither of them reaching for the door. Deo exhaled slowly. "We'll try the next option." Minra didn't respond immediately. She stared ahead. Then, "How many options are left?" That question lingered, not because it was difficult, but because it was honest. Deo shifted slightly. "As many as it takes." She turned her head, finally looking at him, and for a second, her expression softened, not defeated, just tired. "I don't want to keep chasing something that keeps moving away," she said quietly. That landed. Deo looked down briefly, then back at her. "We're not chasing," he said. "We're building toward it." A small silence followed. Then she nodded, not fully convinced, but not walking away either. Because even with everything they were going through, one thing hadn't changed. They both still wanted the same thing. A child, after years of trying, adjusting, hoping. The word alternative stopped sounding distant. It became real. It was Minra who brought it up again, not in a hospital, not during an appointment, but at home. They were sitting in the living room, the evening quiet, untouched by distraction. She had a file in her hand, thin, organized, intentional. Deo noticed it immediately. "You've been looking into it." She nodded once. "I didn't want to bring it up again, unless I was sure." He leaned back slightly. "Sure about what?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she understood what it meant. Surrogacy. The word sat between them, not heavy, but not light either. Deo didn't respond immediately. His gaze shifted briefly to the file, then back to her. "You trust that process?" Minra exhaled slowly. "It's not about trust in the process," she said. "It's about giving ourselves a chance, in a different way." That was how it started. Profiles were reviewed, backgrounds checked, medical histories analyzed. But none of that mattered as much as one thing, the person. Because this wasn't just a procedure. It was personal. And then, Matina's name came up. No flashy background, no exaggerated presentation, just clear information. Direct, straightforward. When she walked into the room for the first meeting, she didn't look around in awe, didn't pause at the size of the house, didn't react to anything. She just walked in like she belonged wherever she stood. Dark skin, steady posture, eyes that didn't move around searching for approval. Minra noticed it first. That quiet confidence, that lack of performance. Deo noticed something else. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and somehow, that made him trust her less They sat across from each other in the private sitting area. No distractions, no interruptions, just space and observation. Deo studied her the way he studied everything unfamiliar. Carefully, quietly. Matina didn't shift under that attention, didn't fidget, didn't soften. She just sat there, waiting. Minra spoke first. "We appreciate you coming in." Matina gave a small nod. "No problem." Simple, no extra effort. Deo leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. "How long have you been doing this?" 2 years. "Why?" The question came sharper than necessary. Matina didn't answer immediately. She held his gaze. Then, "Well, why do you need me?" The air changed. Deo's expression didn't shift much, but something in his posture did. "That's not the same thing," he replied. She tilted her head slightly. "It is." A pause. "You think I'm here because of your money," she continued. "So, let's not pretend this is just about curiosity." There it was. Direct. Unfiltered. Minra glanced between them, sensing it. Deo sat back slowly. "I don't know you." Matina gave a small nod. "Exactly." Her voice stayed calm, steady. "So don't decide who I am before I even speak." That landed, not loudly, but clearly. Minra leaned forward slightly, her tone softer. "Matina, this isn't just a process for us." Matina's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time, there was a slight change. "I know," she said. Not defensive, not distant, just aware. "And that's why I'm here." The room settled slightly after that, but the tension didn't disappear. It just adjusted, because while Minra saw possibility, Deo still saw risk. And Matina? She saw exactly what she was walking into. The tension didn't disappear after that first exchange. It just settled into the room. Not loud, not confrontational, but present. Minra noticed it immediately. The way Deo leaned back slightly, guarded. The way Matina sat upright, unmoved. Two strong personalities, neither willing to bend first. So she stepped in, not forcefully, not to interrupt, just to balance the space. "Can we start over?" Minra said gently, her voice calm but firm enough to hold attention. Both of them looked at her. "This isn't a negotiation," she continued. "It's something much more personal than that." Matina's eyes softened, just a little, not enough to change her posture, but enough to show she was listening differently. Deo remained quiet, watching. Minra turned slightly toward him. "Deo." A pause. "We said we would approach this with openness." He didn't respond immediately. Then finally, "I am being open." Matina let out a quiet breath through her nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite irritation, just a reaction. Minra caught it, and instead of ignoring it, she acknowledged it. "That right there," she said softly, looking between them. "That's exactly why this matters." Silence followed. Then she shifted her attention fully to Matina. "You don't need to prove anything here," she said. Matina held her gaze, studying her. "And you don't need to defend yourself before anything has even started." That landed differently, not like an argument, more like an invitation. Matina leaned back slightly, not relaxed, but less rigid. "I'm not here to convince anyone," she said. Minra nodded. "I know." A small pause. "I just want this to feel right, for all of us." That was the first moment the room felt aligned. Not perfect, but balanced. Because Minra wasn't trying to control the situation, she was trying to protect it. And, somehow, that made both of them listen. The paperwork came next. Detailed, structured, thorough. Every expectation written clearly. Every responsibility outlined. No room for confusion. They sat at the table together. Documents spread out neatly. Matina read everything, line by line. No skipping, no rushing. Deo noticed. "You're taking your time." She didn't look up. "I always do." A pause. especially when it involves something permanent. That word stayed in the air for a second. Minra watched quietly, not interrupting, not rushing the process, because she understood this wasn't just legal. It was life-altering. When Matina finally looked up, her expression hadn't changed much. Still composed, still steady. "I have one question," she said. Deo nodded slightly. "Go ahead. If anything changes, anything at all, are you both going to be honest about it?" Minra answered first. "Yes." Deo followed, his tone measured. "Of course." Matina held their gaze for a moment longer, as if weighing something unspoken. Then she picked up the pen. No dramatic pause, no hesitation in her movement. She signed. Minra exhaled quietly, a small release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. Deo reached for the document next, signed his part, and just like that, it was done. But something remained, not doubt, not conflict, just distance. Because even though the agreement was complete, trust wasn't. Matina gathered her things slowly, stood up. "I'll follow the schedule," she said. Minra nodded. "Thank you." Deo didn't say anything, but his eyes followed her as she walked toward the door, not with judgment this time, but not with trust either, somewhere in between. And that space, that unresolved tension, it was going to matter later. Once the agreement was signed, everything shifted from conversation to reality. Schedules were set. Appointments became consistent again. But this time, with direction. Matina approached it the same way she approached everything else. No drama, no unnecessary emotion, just focus. She showed up on time, listened carefully, followed every instruction without needing reminders. Minra noticed quickly. "She's very disciplined," she said one afternoon, reviewing notes from the clinic. Deo gave a small nod. "She's doing what she agreed to do. Simple, efficient." But Minra saw more than that. Because during the early weeks, there were moments, small ones, easy to overlook. Like the way Matina would ask questions that weren't strictly required. "How is she doing? Any changes I should be aware of?" Not about herself, about the process. Minra responded every time. Patient, open, and slowly, something began to form. Not closeness, not friendship, but understanding. Deo stayed observant, always present during key appointments, always listening, but never fully relaxed. Because to him, this was still an arrangement, a structured agreement with clear boundaries, nothing more. One afternoon, after a routine check, they stepped out into the hospital parking area. Minra turned to Matina. "You've been handling everything really well." Matina adjusted her bag slightly. "I said I would." A pause. Then she added, "I don't take things like this lightly." That caught Minra's attention. Not the words, but the way she said them, like there was something behind them, something deeper than obligation. Deo noticed it too. But instead of leaning into that thought, he stepped back from it. Because reading too much into things like that, that's how expectations form, and expectations were dangerous. After the delivery, everything followed the structure of the agreement. Recovery period, medical clearance, final check-ins, and then Matina left. No long goodbye, no emotional send-off. She stood near the doorway, her bag resting lightly against her shoulder. Minra held the baby close, still adjusting to the reality of finally having her. "Take care of yourself," Minra said softly. Matina gave a small nod. "You too." Deo stood a few steps behind, watching, not cold, not distant, just reserved. "Thank you," he added. She glanced at him briefly. "Yeah, simple." And then she walked out. The house changed after that. Not drastically, but noticeably. There was more sound now, more movement, more life. The once quiet spaces started to fill with something new. Crying, laughter, small interruptions that didn't feel like interruptions at all. Minra adjusted quickly, naturally, like she had been waiting for this version of herself. Deo watched it all carefully, still learning how to exist in this new rhythm. And for a while, that was enough. Until one weekend, there was a knock at the door. Deo answered it, and paused. Matina stood there, no announcement, no prior message, just there. "I brought something," she said. He looked at her, confused. She held up a small container. "I figured she might need it." A pause. "Milk." That word hung in the air for a second. Deo stepped aside slowly. "Come in." She didn't step too far inside. Just enough. Minra approached, the baby in her arms. When she saw Matina, there was no discomfort, no hesitation, just recognition. "You didn't have to come all the way back," Minra said gently. Matina shrugged slightly. "I was already in the area." It wasn't fully true, but it wasn't fully false either. From that point on, she came back. Not daily, not often enough to feel intrusive. Just consistently. Weekends, same time, same quiet presence. No announcements, no expectations. Just showing up and leaving again. At first, it felt like a continuation of the agreement. Nothing more, nothing beyond what had already been established. But over time, small things began to shift. Matina didn't just drop things off anymore. Sometimes she stayed a little longer. Not long enough to disrupt anything, just enough to make sure everything was settled before she left. She would watch the baby for a moment, quietly, not with attachment, not in a way that demanded anything, just awareness. Minra noticed it. "You can hold her, you know," she said one afternoon. Matina hesitated, not immediately reaching out. "Are you sure?" Minra nodded. That was the first time. Careful hands, measured movement, like she understood the weight of what she was holding. The baby settled almost instantly. Minra smiled slightly. "She likes you." Matina didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted. Just a little. From that point on, it became easier. Not frequent, not overly familiar, just natural. She would hold the baby when needed, adjust things quietly, step in without being asked, then step back just as easily. There was no claiming, no overstepping, and that's what made it different. Deo saw it all. Every visit, every moment, every interaction, and while Minra saw comfort, he saw something else. A pattern, not a negative one, not harmful, but unfamiliar, because to him, consistency without expectation didn't make sense. One evening, after Matina left, he stood by the window, watching her car pull away. Minra joined him. "She didn't have to keep coming back," she said softly. Deo didn't respond immediately. "Maybe she feels responsible," he said. Minra glanced at him. "Or maybe she just cares." He shook his head slightly. "People don't just do things like that without a reason." A pause. "There's always something behind it." Minra didn't argue, but she didn't agree either, because what she saw didn't feel like obligation anymore. It felt like presence. And that difference? It was going to matter. Life had started to settle into something. Stable, not perfect, not without questions, but stable enough to breathe again. The house had adjusted. The baby girl brought rhythm. Minra moved through her days with quiet confidence. Matina's presence remained occasional, but consistent. And Deo? He had stopped questioning everything. All the time, not completely, but enough to feel less tense. Then one morning, everything shifted. Minra stood in the bathroom longer than usual. The door slightly closed, not locked, just not fully open. Deo noticed it when he walked past, paused, then kept going. A few minutes later, her voice called out, "Deo?" It wasn't loud, but it carried something. He turned back, walked toward the door. "You okay?" A pause. "I think you should come here." That was enough. He stepped in. Minra stood by the sink, one hand resting lightly on the counter, the other holding something small. She didn't speak immediately, just looked at him. Then, "I think I'm pregnant." The words didn't land right away. Deo blinked. "What?" She gave a small, uncertain laugh. I know how it sounds." He stepped closer, frowning slightly. Did you check properly? She nodded. Twice. Silence. Not empty, just full of disbelief. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. After everything they had been told, after all the years. Deo ran a hand through his hair slowly. We need to confirm it. Minra nodded quickly. I already booked an appointment. That same day. They were back at the hospital. But this time, it felt different. Not routine, not expected. The doctor reviewed the results carefully, then looked up. It's positive. That was it. No long explanation, no hesitation, just confirmation. Minra's breath caught. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. Deo leaned back slightly in his seat, processing. You're sure? The doctor gave a small nod. Yes. And, just like that, everything they had stopped hoping for came back. The house felt different again, not like before, not like when they were waiting. This time, there was certainty. Minra moved with a lightness that hadn't been there in years. Not exaggerated, not dramatic, just present. She smiled more, spoke softer, took her time with things that used to feel rushed. Even the way she held their daughter changed, like she was carrying more than just the moment. Deo noticed everything, not in a distant way, not observing, but participating. He started coming home earlier, cancelling things that didn't matter, being there, fully. One evening, they sat together in the living room, the baby asleep nearby. Minra leaned back slightly, her hand resting gently over her stomach. It still doesn't feel real, she said quietly. Deo glanced at her. It is. She smiled faintly. I know, She stopped, shook her head slightly. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That was the part neither of them said out loud. Hope had hurt them before. Deo shifted closer. Not dramatic, just enough. We'll take it one step at a time. She nodded. Okay. A small silence followed. Comfortable. Then, she looked at him again. Do you think this changes anything? He frowned slightly. Changes what? Everything, she said softly. That question lingered, because it wasn't just about the pregnancy. It was about their past, their struggle, everything they had carried to get here. Deo didn't answer immediately. Then, it doesn't erase anything. She held his gaze. But it gives us something new. Minra nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt possible. It didn't start as an emergency. At first, it felt like every other checkup. Minra had been careful, following instructions, attending appointments, taking everything seriously. There were no warning signs, nothing that suggested something was wrong. Until one night, everything changed. It was late, the house quiet, their daughter already asleep. Minra stood slowly from the couch, one hand pressing lightly against her side. Deo noticed immediately. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Her brows tightened slightly. It's probably nothing. He stepped closer. What kind of nothing? She tried to adjust her posture, took a breath. Then, it hurts. That was enough. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. Minra stayed quiet most of the way, not because she wasn't feeling anything, but because she was trying to manage it. Deo's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Stay with me, he said. She nodded. I'm here. But her voice didn't carry the same steadiness as before. By the time they arrived, everything moved fast. Doctors, nurses, questions. She's in pain. Deo started. We've got her, one of them said quickly. They took her in. Deo followed as far as he could, then stopped. Because there's always a point where you're no longer in control, and that point came quickly. From the other side of the room, he could hear her, not loud, not screaming, but strained, and that sound, it stayed with him. Minutes stretched. Time lost shape. A doctor stepped out briefly. We need to proceed immediately, he said. Deo frowned. Proceed with what? Delivery. The word hit hard. Now? The doctor didn't soften it. Yes, everything after that moved faster than he could process, and all he could do was stand there, waiting. The door finally opened. A nurse stepped out first. Then the doctor. Deo stood up immediately. "Is she okay?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "We did everything we could," the doctor said. The words didn't land properly. Deo blinked. "What does that mean?" Another pause. "I'm sorry." Silence. No sound, no reaction, just stillness. Because sometimes the mind refuses to catch up. Deo shook his head slightly. "No, that's not. No." He stepped forward. "I need to see her." They didn't stop him. The room felt colder than before. Minra lay still, too still. Deo approached slowly, each step heavier than the last. "Minra?" No response. He stood there for a second, then reached for her hand. It didn't move, and something inside him shifted, not loudly, not violently, just broke. "I told you." His voice cracked slightly. "We were going to take this one step at a time." No answer. His grip tightened. "You said okay." Silence. Behind him, a soft cry filled the room. The baby, his son, alive. Deo closed his eyes briefly, and for the first time, he didn't know where to stand. Between loss and responsibility, between what he had just lost and what he had just gained. When he finally turned, they placed the baby in his arms. Small, fragile, real. Deo looked down at him, and for a moment, everything else faded. "Hey," his voice lowered, not steady, but trying. "It's just us now." The baby cried softly, and Deo held him closer, because there was nothing else he could hold on to. Grief doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly. The house changed again, not with joy this time, not with anticipation, but with something heavier. The baby cried through the nights. The older child moved through the house more carefully now. And Deo, he existed in between responsibilities, not fully present, not completely absent, just carrying everything. And that's when they started showing up. His siblings. At first, it felt right. They came early, stayed longer than usual, spoke softly, like they understood what he was going through. Narelle was the most present, always the first to arrive, always the last to leave. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," she said one afternoon, gently taking the baby from his arms. Deo didn't resist. "I'm fine," he replied. She shook her head slightly. "No, you're not." It sounded like concern. It looked like support. And for a while, he accepted it. They helped around the house, coordinated small things, checked in often. But then, something shifted. Not dramatically, not enough to point at immediately. Just subtle changes. Conversations lingered longer than necessary. Questions became more specific. "Have you thought about restructuring things? What's the plan moving forward? Who's handling everything now?" At first, it seemed practical. Then it started to feel focused, not on him, but on what surrounded him. One evening, after they left, Deo stood in the hallway, the baby resting against his shoulder, the house quiet again. And for a moment, he replayed everything. The tone, the questions, the timing. "That's strange," he muttered under his breath, because grief had brought them closer. But something about their presence didn't feel natural. It felt intentional. At first, he ignored it, told himself it was just adjustment, just family trying to step in. But the pattern didn't fade. It became clearer. Visits were no longer just about checking in. They stayed even when there was nothing to do, asked questions that didn't need answers, moved through the house like they were getting comfortable, too comfortable. Deo started paying attention, not reacting, just observing. One afternoon, he sat in the living room, while two of his siblings spoke quietly in the kitchen. They didn't know he could hear them. "We just need to be smart about it," one voice said. Another responded, "I know, but timing matters." A pause. We can't rush this. Deo didn't move, didn't interrupt, just listened. Because that conversation, it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like planning. Later that evening, Narelle approached him again. You should really consider letting us help more, she said. He looked at her, carefully. Help with what? She hesitated briefly. Everything. That answer didn't sit right, not because of what she said, but because of how vague it was. Deo leaned back slightly. I've been managing. She gave a small smile. Well, you don't have to. There it was again. That tone. Support on the surface. Something else underneath. That night, after everyone left, Deo sat alone. The baby asleep nearby. The house quiet. And for the first time, he didn't feel comforted by their presence. He felt watched. A slow realization settled in, not loud, not immediate, but clear enough. They're not here for me. That thought didn't come from anger. It came from observation, and once it formed, it didn't leave. Once the thought settled in, Deo didn't rush. He didn't confront anyone, didn't accuse, didn't react emotionally. He planned, because if he was going to understand the truth, he needed to remove the one thing that could be influencing it. Money. It started quietly. A few conversations, some intentional decisions. He pulled back from certain deals, let a few opportunities fall through, allowed small losses to become visible. Nothing drastic at first, just enough to create a shift. And people noticed. Phone calls changed. Hey, I heard something about one of your projects. Is everything okay on your end? The tone wasn't panic. It was curiosity. Deo responded the same way every time. Calm, controlled, just restructuring. But he didn't correct the assumptions that followed, because slowly, those assumptions started to grow. Conversations spread, information moved, and within weeks, the narrative changed. Not publicly, but within the circle that mattered most. His family. They're saying things aren't stable anymore. That was one of the comments he overheard. Another, he might have overextended. Deo didn't defend himself. He let it build, because the goal wasn't to protect his image, it was to observe behavior. And behavior changes when comfort disappears. Soon, the visits adjusted, not immediately, not obvious enough to call out, but noticeable. They came less often, stayed shorter, asked fewer questions, and when they did ask, it wasn't about him anymore. It was about confirmation. So it's true? Deo looked at one of them calmly. What's true? That things aren't the same. A pause. He didn't answer right away. Then, things change. That was enough, because once doubt enters, people fill in the rest themselves. And just like that, the foundation shifted. The moment came quietly. No announcement, no build-up. Just a situation that required help. The baby had been restless, crying more than usual. The older child needed attention too, and for the first time, Deo decided to ask. Not for everything, not for long-term support, just help. He called Narelle. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said. His voice stayed steady. I need you to take him for a while. A pause. What do you mean? The baby, Deo clarified. Just for a bit. I need to handle something. Silence. Not long, but long enough to notice. Well, I would, she started. But things are kind of tight right now. Deo frowned slightly. Tight? She shifted her tone. Yeah, I've got a lot going on. It's just not a good time. That answer didn't match what he knew, not even close. You don't have to keep him long, he said. Another pause. I just can't right now. There it was. Clear. No excuse strong enough to hide what it really meant. Deo stood still, phone still in his hand. All right. He ended the call. No argument. No reaction. Just silence. Then slowly, he looked down at the baby in his arms, and something in his expression changed. Not anger. Not disappointment. clarity, because the question he had been holding on to finally had an answer. If I had nothing, would they still be here? Now, let me ask you something, bestie. Be honest. If you were in his position, would your family step up, or would they find a reason to step back? Because what happened next, it didn't just confirm his doubts, it exposed everything. After that call with Narelle, something inside Deo settled, not in a comforting way, not in a hopeful way, but in a way that felt final. He stopped expecting anything from them, stopped waiting, stopped assuming help would come, and once he did that, everything became clearer. But clarity didn't solve his problem, because the baby still needed care, still needed feeding, still needed someone present, and for the first time, Deo felt the weight of doing it alone. Not the business side, not the decisions, but the human part of it. Late one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Deo opened it and paused. Matina stood there, not dressed up, not trying to explain herself, just standing. "I heard," she said. Her voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't distant either. Deo looked at her for a second. "Heard what?" She held his gaze. "About your wife." A pause. "I'm sorry." The words didn't feel forced, didn't feel rehearsed. They just landed. Deo nodded once. "Thank you." Silence followed. Not awkward, just present. Then she shifted slightly. "I just had a placement recently," she said. He frowned. "What?" "A baby," she clarified. "For another family." He didn't fully understand where she was going with it. Then, "I still have milk." That changed everything. The air in the doorway felt different. Deo blinked once. "You're saying you can feed him?" Matina nodded. "If it works. No promises, no assumptions, just possibility." He stepped back slowly. "Come in." They didn't waste time. Within the hour, they were at the hospital. Tests were done quickly, efficiently. A nurse checked compatibility, reviewed everything carefully. Then finally, "She's a match." Those words carried relief. Not emotional, not dramatic, just necessary. Deo exhaled slowly. Matina didn't react much, just nodded. "Okay." And just like that, she stepped back into their lives, not as an agreement, not as a contract, but as a solution. This time, there were no long discussions, no drawn-out negotiations, just clarity. Deo sat across from Matina later that evening, the house quiet, the children asleep. "I want to make this simple," he said. She didn't interrupt. "I'll pay you for a full year." A pause, not shock, not excitement, just processing. "A year?" she asked. He nodded. "You'll stay involved, help with him, make sure he's okay." Matina leaned back slightly. "That's a long commitment." "It is." Silence. She studied him for a moment. "Why me?" That question wasn't defensive. It was direct. Deo didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because you showed up." That was it. No long explanation, just truth. Matina looked away briefly, then back at him. "I'm not doing this for you," she said. He nodded. "I know." Another pause. "I'm doing it for the child." Good. That settled it. No handshake, no formal closing, just agreement. And from that moment, she became part of their daily structure again, not as an outsider, not as someone passing through, but as someone present. And Deo? He made one more decision, one that would change everything. He was going to disappear. Deo didn't rush the final step. Everything before it, the distance, the doubt, the behavior he observed, it all led here. If he wanted the truth completely, he couldn't just remove money. He had to remove himself. The plan was quiet, precise. No one outside a very small circle knew anything. To everyone else, it looked like a normal trip. Just a few days, he told Matina. She stood near the kitchen, adjusting the baby in her arms. "You sure you should be leaving now?" He paused, not because he didn't have an answer, but because the timing wasn't easy. I'll be back before anything changes, he said. She looked at him for a second. Things have already changed. That landed, but he didn't respond, because what he was about to do couldn't be explained. The day he left, everything felt normal, routine, predictable, until it wasn't. 2 days later, the call came in, then another, and then the news spread. A ship, an incident, no clear details, no confirmed survivors, and one name, Deo Ainsworth, missing. The house changed instantly. Phones started ringing. Messages flooded in. Voices filled the space again. But this time, it wasn't quiet concern. It was urgency. Confusion mixed with something else. Matina stood still, holding the baby. No, she whispered under her breath, because unlike everyone else, she didn't react outwardly. She didn't panic. She just stopped processing, because something about it didn't sit right. Not fully, not completely, but there was no time to question it, because within days, everything began to shift again. It didn't take long. Narelle arrived first, not slowly, not cautiously, direct. Boxes came in. Movements became louder. Decisions started being made, without discussion. Matina noticed immediately the way things were rearranged, the way instructions were given, the way the house no longer felt like it belonged to the children. You should move these, Narelle said one morning, pointing at items near the living room. Matina frowned slightly. Why? We need space. For what? Narelle didn't hesitate. I'm hosting something. That word didn't sit right. Hosting. Yes, she replied casually. A small gathering. Matina looked at her, trying to understand. A gathering here? Narelle gave a short nod. Life goes on. Silence followed. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just disbelief. Matina adjusted the baby in her arms. They just lost their father. Narelle exhaled sharply. Well, we can't pause everything. That was the moment something shifted. Not in the house, in Matina, because up until that point, she had been patient, observant, quiet. But now, she was seeing clearly, and it didn't look right. The day of the gathering, the house no longer felt like a home. Music played, voices filled the space. Laughter, misplaced, out of time, echoed through the rooms. Matina stood near the hallway, the children close to her, watching, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. Then Narelle approached. You need to take them with you. Matina blinked. What? The kids, Narelle said, already distracted. They can't be here. Matina's grip tightened slightly. Why not? Narelle glanced at her briefly. They're in the way. That was it. No hesitation, no softness, just truth, cold and clear. And in that moment, everything became undeniable, because it wasn't about timing, not about space. It was about priority. And the children? They weren't one. Matina stood there for a second, then slowly. Okay. Not because she agreed, but because she understood something now, something Deo had already seen. And now, she was seeing it too. Matina didn't argue that day. She just gathered what the children needed, packed lightly, carefully, not because she agreed, but because there was no point fighting in that moment. The music was still playing behind her, voices rising and falling like nothing important had been said. She stepped out quietly. The air outside felt different, clearer but heavier, because now she wasn't just helping, she was responsible, at least temporarily. That's what she told herself. A few days, maybe a week, just until things settled. That's what made sense. But when she returned, everything changed again. She stood at the door, children beside her, bag resting at her side. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Then her phone rang. Narelle. Matina answered immediately. I'm outside, she said. A pause. I know. Matina frowned. So open the door. Silence. Then, I'm not taking them back. The The words didn't register at first. What? You were paid, Narelle continued, her tone flat. Keep them until the time is up. Matina's grip tightened on the phone. That's not how this works. It is now. Her voice remained calm, too calm. These are children, Matina said, her voice rising slightly. Not something you pass around when it's convenient. Narelle exhaled softly. Look, I have a lot going on. Just handle it. Handle it. Like it was nothing. Matina closed her eyes briefly. You're their aunt. No response. This is your family. Another pause. Then, I said what I said. The line went dead. Matina stood there, phone still in her hand, and for a moment, she didn't move, because what just happened wasn't misunderstanding. It was rejection. Clear. Final. She looked down at the children. The baby shifted slightly in her arms. The older one stayed close. And just like that, the situation changed. Not temporarily, completely. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Not for the children, not for her. The baby cried more than usual. Restless, the older child woke up twice, looking around like something was missing. And Matina, she moved between them. Quietly, carefully, doing everything she could, without fully knowing how long she would have to do it. Because this wasn't planned, this wasn't structured, this wasn't something she had prepared for. She sat down eventually, the baby finally asleep against her chest. The room dim, still. This wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered under her breath. Not frustration, not anger, just truth. Because she had her own life, her own responsibilities, her own direction. And now, everything had paused. Not because she chose to, but because she had to. The next morning, reality settled in deeper. Schedules had to change. Priorities had to shift. Decisions had to be made quickly. She adjusted, not perfectly, but effectively, because the children needed stability, even if she didn't feel it herself. Days passed. Then, something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. Matina opened it. A man stood there, dressed neatly, holding a few bags. Delivery? She asked. He shook his head. No. Just dropping these off. She frowned slightly. From who? A small pause. Just take them. He handed her the bags. Basic supplies. Things she hadn't had time to get yet. Formula. Essentials. Items that made things easier. Matina looked at him. Why? He didn't answer directly. Just make sure they're okay. Then he left. She stood there for a second, confused, but also relieved, because even though she didn't know where it came from, it helped. And right now, that was enough. In their family, there was a tradition. It wasn't written down, not formal, but it was respected. When a child turned 4 months, they were taken to church, a quiet moment, a blessing, a way of marking life. Properly, Minra had believed in it, talked about it once, back when things were still calm. We'll take them together, she had said. That memory stayed with Matina, and now, 4 months had passed. The baby had reached that point. But no one mentioned it. No calls, no reminders, no plans. The house where it should have been organized stayed silent. Matina waited at first, not expecting much, but expecting something, a message, a call, any sign that it still mattered. Nothing came, so she made a decision. Not dramatic, not loud, just necessary. She dressed the baby carefully, simple, clean. The older child stood nearby, watching. Where are we going? She asked softly. Matina adjusted the baby's blanket. somewhere important. The church wasn't far, small, quiet. Not the kind of place people noticed from the outside, but inside, it held meaning. Matina stepped in slowly. No crowd, no family, just her. She sat near the front, the baby in her arms, the older child beside her. And for a moment, she didn't say anything, just sat there, because this wasn't her role. It wasn't her responsibility, but somehow, it had become hers. The pastor approached gently. "Is this your child?" he asked. Matina paused. "Not long, but enough. I'm the one taking care of them." That was the truth. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The blessing was simple. Quiet words, soft prayers, nothing dramatic, but it carried weight, because even without the people who should have been there, the moment still happened, and Matina made sure of it. Time moved forward, not quickly, not slowly, just steadily. The older child's birthday came around. It wasn't something Matina could ignore, not after everything. So she planned something small, nothing extravagant, no decorations filling the house, just something simple, something meaningful. A cake, a few items, enough to make the day feel different. She hesitated before making the call. Then, she dialed, one by one. She reached out to the family. "Just come for a little while," she said. It's her birthday. There was hesitation, excuses at first, then reluctant agreement. They arrived late, not together, not coordinated, just individually. And when they walked in, it was obvious. No gifts, no effort, just presence. Matina watched quietly. The older child stood near the table, waiting, looking at the door every time it opened, like she expected something more. But nothing came. Narelle walked in last. She glanced around briefly. "This is it?" she said. Matina looked at her. "It's enough." A pause. Narelle shrugged slightly. "Well, as long as she's happy." But she didn't check, didn't ask, didn't even look closely. The cake was brought out. A small smile appeared on the child's face. That part mattered, but everything around it felt empty. Matina stood back, watching, and for a second, she let out a quiet breath, because she understood something now. Not everyone who shows up actually cares, and not everyone who cares needs to be seen. The birthday didn't end with celebration. It ended with tension. The cake was gone. The small smiles faded. And what was left was the same energy that had been building for months. Voices started low. "So what happens now?" One of them asked. Another responded. "We can't just leave things the way they are." Matina stood near the edge of the room, children close to her, listening, because now they weren't pretending anymore. They weren't talking about care, not about responsibility. They were talking about assets. "The house is still in his name," one voice said. "That doesn't mean anything if he's gone," another replied. Narelle stepped forward slightly. "We need to decide who takes control." Control, that word didn't sit right. Matina frowned. "What about the children?" The room paused, not out of respect, out of surprise, because they hadn't been part of the conversation. "They're taken care of," Narelle said quickly. Matina shook her head slightly. "No, I mean long-term." A pause. "They should have the house." Silence, not soft, not thoughtful, sharp. Then, the reaction came fast. A hand moved before the words did. Slap. The sound cut through the room. Matina staggered slightly, not falling, not reacting immediately, just absorbing it. "Stay out of family matters," Narelle snapped. "You're just here to do a job." The room stayed still. No one stepped in, no one spoke up. Matina slowly lifted her hand to her cheek. Not angry, not emotional, just steady. "I am doing my job," she said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. "And somehow, I still care more than all of you." That landed differently, because it wasn't loud. It was true. The door opened, Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Footsteps followed, then a voice. So this is what it looks like without me. Everything stopped. Every movement, every word. Matina turned first. Her breath caught. No, the room tilted. Her vision blurred. And before she could steady herself, she collapsed. Matina. Deo moved fast, catching her before she hit the ground. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Not the room, not the people, just her. Hey, stay with me. His voice wasn't controlled anymore. It wasn't measured. It was real. Everything else faded. When she opened her eyes, the room was quieter, different. Deo sat nearby, watching her. "You're awake," he said. She blinked slowly, trying to focus. Then she saw him clearly, and everything came back. "You," she whispered. He nodded once. "Yeah." She pushed herself up slightly. "You're alive." Not relief. Something deeper. Deo exhaled slowly. "I owe you an apology." She let out a faint breath. "An apology? I put you through something you didn't deserve," he said. "The stress, the pressure, everything." She looked at him for a moment. "I didn't do it for you. I know." A pause. "But you still went through it." Silence. Then, "There's something you need to know," he added. She frowned slightly. "What?" The lawyer. Her brows pulled together. "What about him?" Deo leaned back slightly. "All those times he showed up, with supplies." A pause. "I sent him." Matina froze. "You did?" He nodded. "I couldn't be here directly," he said. "But I wasn't going to leave you alone." That shifted everything. All those moments. The unexpected help. The quiet support. "I thought it was random," she said softly. Deo shook his head. "No." Another pause. "I never fully left." That truth settled slowly, not loud, but deep, behind them. The room remained silent, because now everything was exposed. Every action, every decision, every absence. Deo stood, turned toward his siblings. "I gave you a chance. No one responded. You showed me exactly who you are." Silence held. "You don't get access to them anymore." That was it. No argument, no negotiation, just consequence. Then he turned back to Matina. "You stayed," he said. She didn't respond immediately. "They needed someone." He nodded. "And now they have you." A pause. Not rushed, not forced, just understood, because what formed between them wasn't sudden. It was built through presence, through action, through choice, and that mattered more than anything else. Family isn't about who's related to you. It's about who shows up. Loyalty isn't tested when things are easy. It's revealed when everything changes. And love? It's not what people say. It's what they do when no one is watching. If this story hit you, even a little, like this video, drop a comment. What would you have done? And subscribe for more real-life stories like this, because the next one, it's even crazier. Like this video, drop a comment. What would you have done? And subscribe for more real-life stories like this, because the next one, it's even crazier.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.